Everybody, thank you very much tonight for coming back to the Pigsty. Tonight we have the wonderful Manda with us as a co-host, and we have Drew's book reviews. A very new, close friend. Suddenly got very close, very quickly. Yes. We'll not talk about why the thumbnail is gagged.
A little quicker than I usually, evolve relationships.
I didn't even buy you dinner.
Hey, everyone.
Yeah, didn't even buy you dinner or nothing. Like, awful. But Drew has a wee channel. It is in the description. So if anybody wants, if you could run down, go into the description, hit that button, subscribe to Drew. He reads books. That's we reviews books, reads books, goes through books. Drew, let everybody know what else do you do? Is there anything else but books?
Well, books are one of my 5 loves. The other 4 being my wife and 3 kids. Yeah, I mean, I love getting into books. I read mostly science fiction and fantasy. An occasional nonfiction book. I definitely I try to get to at least 1 nonfiction book a month. I like expanding my knowledge base. The most recent one I read that was nonfiction was Hero of 1,000 Faces. So that was a really fascinating read about the Monomyth and how our mythology has influenced the stories we tell ourselves, whether that's through science fiction, fantasy, literature, and how that monomyth is prevalent through not just our religious identities, through the many different religions throughout the world, but also our literature. So that's a fascinating read, and I really, really like that. Kind of put a whole, in fact, I watched Star Wars after I finished reading that book, and suddenly I found myself analyzing and looking at Star Wars in a whole new light as a result. It's the book that George Lucas said influenced him to write Star Wars, which was pretty interesting once you got into that. It's a classic, Hero of 1,000 Faces. So definitely visit my YouTube channel. Check out my review on that one.
Yes, it's in the chat as well. Ox has posted your link in the chat as well. So everybody hit that button and give Drew a wee. Drew, usually the first thing we usually do is go down the route. What brought you to the internet? Just have lots of books and a big mouth and needed to scream at people, or I know that I found you through a wee rabbit hole down with GE. So there was that ex-Mormon story, which was it the books that brought you on, and then GE found you that way, or was it the Mormonness that got you found that way? Or?
Well, yeah, it's as far as what got me onto the internet. I actually started. It was, I don't know, like back in 2012, 2013, something like that. I was collecting books so quickly that I was losing track of which ones I'd read and which ones I hadn't. And I had no system to keep track of what I was going to read, the books that I wanted, and the books that I'd already read. And I needed to organize this somehow. And I thought just keeping a spreadsheet on my computer can get a bit tedious. And so I found the site WordPress, and I thought, all right, I'll just use WordPress just to blog about this. And then I could have a page of books I'm going to read, books that I want to get that I don't have. And just kind of started as a way to keep track of what my next book is going to be, which ones I hadn't gotten to yet. But I found that I was really, really bad at writing reviews. And despite the fact that I read so much, I'll admit my grammar can be terrible when I write. My spelling can be atrocious. And despite my best efforts, I still miss so much in the editing before I hit that post blog. So if I said, you know what, I should just start a YouTube channel. I don't have to worry about how things are spelt when I'm talking. So I started a YouTube channel in 2017. And honestly, you can go back and look at my first video. The quality was terrible. Like, it sucked.
We all have to start somewhere.
Yeah, it's just horrible quality. And so I just started doing my YouTube channel, and I still have the WordPress site, but honestly, I'm not very active on there at all. I've kind of transitioned to the Goodreads platform with my different shelves of my book wish list, my to be read, my read book currently reading. So I'm kind of using that mostly to kind of keep track of that now. So the site's there in case anyone happens to visit it for some reason, which I don't know why, because I just posted, go to my YouTube channel. It's all there.
I know what you mean about having like this connection to books, though. When my son and I moved here to Georgia a few years ago from Arizona, we had to, cart everything across the country. It was kind of a last minute thing. And I had boxes and boxes of books that I had been collecting over the years, that it was much more important to me to keep those books than it was like I got rid of a lot of clothes. I don't think I have any Christmas decorations that I kept. Like, I got rid of a lot of his stuff just to make room for the books. I don't know. There's something about having that connection, especially books that you've read and invested yourself in, that it's hard to let go of, and I think a lot of people feel the same way. So.
Oh, totally. When we moved here, we in 2015, we moved from Alberta, Canada, all the way out to the west coast on Vancouver Island, Victoria. Huge move. I've never done a move like that in my life, let alone relocating my entire family. And when we were packing, my wife said to me, it's like, if you think I'm carrying those books when we move, you're crazy. You're packing them, you're moving them, they're your books. I'm not, and I had half as many books as I do now. In fact, I've run out of space. I don't have anywhere else I could put a bookshelf, and my bookshelves are full. So
you should see our friend Junkshop Library. There's a reason he has that name. They were actually, him and his wife, or they and their wife, sorry, Junkshop, just moved recently, and they were packing up. And just the sheer amount, he explained to us all the bookshelves. I think it was like 7 of them just downstairs and completely packed, like, double packed. And I think a lot of us do that. A lot of us have just books upon books upon books, because we're, especially in this community, the skeptic community, whether it be, atheist, agnostic community, anything, we're all, or, scientists, whatever, we all really thirst, like you said, for that knowledge and to learn something new. And you add in that at least one nonfiction book a month, which, thanks for making us all feel really stupid now. I can't remember the last one. No. Dr. Josh's book, that was the last nonfiction book I did read. So
I've read a lot of nonfiction. You've been reading mostly nonfiction since I've met you. A lot of biographies and stories and things.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I don't read as much of the
I find with a book now, the reason that I think people have that attachment to the book is because of the world that you create inside your mind. You watch 100%. A TV show, everybody sees the exact same thing, and the epicness of it is basically dependent on the budget, on the director, on the special effects and things like that, to make that connection and portray that across to the audience. Where when you read a book, you can describe and talk about the book with another person, but the story that you've both seen inside your head was different. It's the same story, but the visuals and all that, and they can be pushed to the extreme. You see them as they're read. You don't have to try and figure out a way to put it on a TV screen. You just see it in your head as it's described.
Yeah, and I've seen so many authors say, hey, ask, what is this story really about? And it says, look, it doesn't matter what I think it's about. I've written my story. How did you interpret it? What did you think of it? Because everybody's going to see it differently. And I think that's why so many people get so mad with the book to screen adaptation. I mean, just look online and you're going to find people ranting and raving saying, that's not what this is about. And I just I agree there have been some terrible adaptations. No argument from me on that. But at the same time, thinking, look, everybody reads a book and they see something different in it. And, I think especially coming from that religious background, as you mentioned, I was ex-Mormon, was on GE's channel, which actually reached out to him when I left the Mormon church, because I was looking for atheist content on YouTube to try to make myself feel better, essentially, about what happened. And that's when I found his channel. So I reached out to him, and that's kind of how we connected. So I found him rather than him finding me. And it just kind of, and ended up being on his channel, which was awesome. And now I'm part of the Skeptic Mafia and all that. It's been great being part of that community. And it was after speaking with GE that I kind of started looking, or after kind of getting more involved in that community, I started looking for, I wanted to get more into nonfiction books as well, because up until then it was pretty much all science fiction and fantasy. But I thought I really need to learn more about the real world, and I need to expand my knowledge, because I'd come from this religious background where, the Bible and the Book of Mormon, that's the real world. And when it got to the point where that's not the real world, I need to learn about the real world. So I started looking at the God Delusion by Richard Dawkins, The End of Faith by Sam Harris, God is Not Great, as well as another one that I read. So I started getting into some nonfiction philosophical books, and I can tell you, I really didn't like Sam Harris's book at all. it was praised as being this great book, but I was like, dude, this isn't about the end of faith. This is about how much you hate Islam. It just really turned me off, because it was all about Islam and not about faith and religion in general, which is what I was actually looking for when I was reading it. It's like, why religious ideology is something that's coming to an end, not why Islam's bad and nobody should follow it, which is basically, Sam Harris should have said the end of Islam would have been a more accurate description. So just because, it's not always a good book just because it happens to spout a philosophy that perhaps you're in agreement with.
Yeah, we're all very lucky to be part of GE's Skeptic Mafia.
He was here earlier. I didn't get a chance because you were talking about, hi G. I said hello in chat.
He's here, but he's the community that he's built around his channel. Him and Casey, because Casey is definitely the heart of that channel.
100%.
Both of them were very supportive to me before I even had a channel or anything. They really, they have such a wonderful community, and they're, I don't know, I'm glad that we were, because we found like cadence through GE and you throughout. So thanks to him for that. But I have a question for you. So if you're talking about book adaptations, what do you think is better? Is it better to read the book first and then watch the movie or TV, or the other way around? Because for me, like, I watched Game of Thrones first before I read the books, and I think I preferred that. Whereas The Gunslinger, Stephen King's fantasy series, I read all of those books and then watched that god-awful movie. But I think, for me personally, I like to I found it better reading the books afterwards, just because you have, like you had mentioned, when you're reading the books you have an idea in your head of what's happening, but if you've already seen something, the show or the movie, you have that in your head already, and you don't have to worry about it getting changed when you watch it afterwards. How do you feel?
Totally. I always default to read the books 100% every time. With Game of Thrones, I actually did see the series and thought, oh, this is based off of a book series. Well, I like the TV show. The books are probably better, and I was right, because it almost is always the case.
Like a general rule of thumb that the books are better.
Oh, yeah. The books are
100%. 100%. The nice thing with books, right? I mean, there's only so much you could do in a 2-hour, 1-hour episodic adaptation. With the books, you could really get into the heart of the issue. Just looking at, Dune as an example, I've no doubt the movie's going to be really good, but there's so much depth to that story that really the whole idea of Dune is, the whole message behind Dune is not allowing fanaticism to control our lives, and not allowing the concept of not letting religion and a god distract us from the reality of the world. And that was part of that whole God Emperor of Dune ideology that was there, is he became this god of stagnation, and essentially where he stopped society from progressing, and just that's it. He controlled everything by stopping the progress of society. So it's this idea of a god inhibiting our progress, and that's not a good thing. And he enforced this peace on everyone. It was like a utopia peace. The universe was great, but there was no progress. People weren't truly happy. And it takes conflict, it takes strife, and it takes challenges in order for humanity to evolve. And that this idea of having a god can block or stop that from happening, which is detrimental to us, not helpful. Just because we think we're happy, that doesn't mean that we are in the end, and it's not necessarily a good thing by default. It's overcoming those obstacles.
It's the stagnation of it. If we stop progressing and we stop moving forward, again referencing what Amanda said about the books and how we read, we do try and better ourselves. We want to be an improvement. As the phrase goes, our kids are the best of us. We want to pass on the best of us, and we want to pass on that drive. The stagnation gets nobody anywhere. And you can
exactly. And that's one of the reasons why Dune is such a successful series, There's a reason it's the best-selling science fiction series in history, from what I understand. I don't think anything else has beat it in terms of total sales, but there's good reason for that. A good story, see, what I love about there's science fiction stories, which honestly can be very boring because they're about the science fiction. And then there's stories that are science fiction or fantasy, but they're not about the fantasy. They're not about the science fiction. What they're about is using that as a setting or, a scene to tell a story that's intrinsic to our own psychology and nature and the ideas and philosophies of which our cultures have evolved. And that's one of the things that Dune does so well. It's not about the technology. It's not about, people in space in the future. It's about the politics. It's about the division. It's about this idea of, God and worship and power and the struggles of humanity and overcoming that. And that's what any good story is. And the nice thing about science fiction and fantasy, I just find is so much more effective at addressing those issues and at addressing those ideas than you ever can in just a straight fiction. The problem with fiction, and fiction isn't bad, just want to say that. If you read fiction, cool, awesome. But the thing with fiction is you're restrained by the laws and rules of our real world. Because once you go beyond that, it's not fiction, it's science fiction or it's fantasy now. And the nice thing about science fiction and fantasy, it enables us to imagine all these awesome things that can play a role within this greater story. And I read some pretty bad science fiction, and I read some really good science fiction. The same goes with fantasy. And it could just be really fun to use that as an exploratory tool for all these ideas that are out there, especially when we look at the context of religion in literature. Because Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces explores this idea of the monomyth, which is derived from religious ideology, and how that's influenced the stories that we read and tell each other. And there's really good ways to approach that and really terrible ways to approach religion in literature. I don't know if either of you read any books where religion plays kind of a central role to the story or religious themes or ideas at all?
That the one that we mentioned to you that I said was my favorite book, which would be Stone Junction by Dawkins. There was sort of there was like a fantasy end till it. The possibility of magic did exist in that world. And as he worked his way through the organization, alchemists, thieves, and robbers, or something, or whatever it was called, alchemists, robbers, and outlaws, or whatever it was, there was that top level of what, like alchemy, where you could learning to control your mind and do things beyond that. And it didn't go deep into religion. It was more, I would say, more like a Buddha, sort of. That sort of aspect of oneself and elevating oneself. But the ending of that book and the way that it ended, that's what really got me. It's like the last 5 or 6 pages of that book was just holy. You read the whole book and it's them 5 pages at the end. And it did sort of go down a religious route towards the end again, not to spoil it, but it was them last bits that just really, the ending made that book for me and made it one of the best stories to have such a good ending.
Send me a link later on to that. I want to check that out.
It'll not take you long. It'll take you probably 2 days.
I think you make a really good point about and this is something we actually talked about a little bit before the show, was finding that balance of not making either the genre or the subject of the book all like what the book is all about. That when you have something like science fiction, the book shouldn't be about the science fiction. It should be the story that's involved with science fiction in the background. We've had this same discussion about, as an example, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It was such a great show because it wasn't a show about vampires. It was a show that had vampires in it, which was interesting and not even something that I'd really be that interested in anyway, but I still loved the story and loved Joss Whedon because it was about the people and what was happening and not, that the subject or the genre right up in your face. So
I had this discussion the other day because I was talking about a sci-fi. And it's you were like, I hate sci-fi. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not a sci-fi show. It's a story set in a sci-fi scene. which is completely different. You know, that's just the background. The actual story is what you need to focus on.
Oh, it's like Star Trek. I mean, it's a science fiction setting, but the stories they tell in that overall universe, not about the science fiction. You know, I mean, there's one of my favorite episodes of the original series, and I say it's one of my favorite episodes, but I'm drawing a blank on its name. But in any case, they go down to this planet, and they're controlled by this supercomputer AI intelligence, but they all worship this thing as God, and they don't even know what it is. And so Kirk is there, and when they see what's going on, Kirk basically has to convince these people that they're being ruled by a computer, that this God that they believe in isn't even a real living thing. It's just an AI intelligence. And he basically has to confront their God and basically completely dismantles the idea of God, destroys it, and forces the people to actually progress beyond their stagnated state. Which kind of ties into that same idea we're talking about in Dune. Yeah. So Dune's not the only one that has approached this idea when trying to discuss these religious ideas. Star Trek did it in the 60s, and even in The Next Generation, there was an episode of The Next Generation that did the same thing. It's like the Devil Among Us or something like that. I'll have to look up the name later. But
The Next Generation, the way it was set up with the episodes, they were very story-based. And each episode of The Next Generation, there was a lot of making a point. You know, this is a philosophical dilemma that we can discuss and make a reference point in real life too. It just happened to be, you know, boldly going where no other man or woman has ever been before.
100%. And Best of Both Worlds was by far the best set of Next Gen episodes ever created. With the Borg and all this. What I love about that is the whole idea behind the Borg and the Best of Both Worlds is, to me, it's very much a commentary on our enslavement and interdependence upon technology. As we start to bring that more and more a part of our nature, that we're becoming enslaved to the very technology that we've created in an effort to improve ourselves. And that's just a really interesting way to present it. To me, at least that's my interpretation of it. Can't speak for other Trekkies, but definitely that seems to be the point being made there, is the Borg is a drone species enslaved to their technology. Mm-hmm. And they constantly want to be better, so they're constantly taking new technology to make themselves better, but they can't break free of this drone hive mind. I mean, look where we're at now. People are attached to their cell phones. You know, there's cybernetic enhancements that you can get even if you don't need it. We've got these devices there's brain-computer interfaces have been developed in labs around the world. And, you know, I mean, could you imagine living in a world at this point where there was no cell phone technology, no internet? Like, it's almost impossible to think of that. We would feel so disconnected from everything and anything that we need our technology now. And so
now, but had we not had it all along,
you don't miss what you haven't got.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that where it is now versus now. So I mean, we are becoming more dependent upon our technology. So looking at that, and of course, it is a really great analogy. I guess the best way to put it, a great way to look at how we're becoming too dependent on technology. And that was something that was written in the 80s. Right, and that's something to keep in mind, right? Like that was the 80s, the 21st century, where we're at now. I love that aspect of that. Anyway,
I have a question. What in terms of the books that you've read, books or series or whatever, what do you think was the best representation of God or a God to you in a book or in a series?
I would say probably the best exploration of religion. It's hard to really pinpoint the best representation of God so much as the best exploration of religious elements. Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive. And what I love about this is, I don't know how many people know Brandon Sanderson, best-selling, internationally selling fantasy author. He's also Mormon, which I didn't know when I started reading his books. And for me, coming from that background really gives me a very different perspective on the religious themes written within his books. And I could use Orson Scott Card as a contrast on Card, who does it poorly as far as I'm concerned, and Sanderson, who does it well. Both of them are Mormon authors. And with Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive, he's created this whole religion called Vorinism. It's got the creator gods and it's got the destroyer gods, kind of representing God, the good guy, and the devil. And within this book series, there's one prominent character. Her name is Yasna. She is a scholar, so she's an educated individual. She's scholarly. She wants to be a scientist for all intents and purposes. And she's an atheist. And she is constantly going up head to head against Vorinism and the Vorin Church. And I like the way that it's written within this book, because the religion itself is written, this is part of the world, but it's not the driving force of the story. But it's written in a way that helps them explore these religious ideas. And there's a few scenes within the series where Yasna is going up against the clerics of Vorinism, because, I mean, everyone's by default a member of the Vorin Church. It's just accepted. Yeah. And she's not the only atheist in this world, I'm sure, but she's a prominent figure in this world. And as an atheist, that makes her extremely controversial to the culture dynamic. And so having these conversations about Vorinism and about why she doesn't believe and why she thinks they're all wrong, and just the back and forth there is really interesting to see Sanderson actually explore this, from knowing he's religious, knowing he's Mormon, and believe the same things I used to believe in. I know what that faith is very well.
One question I wanted to ask you is, how is that character in the show portrayed? You know, because as you're describing to what would be, we have a, you know, Spartan and a few other people in the community that would be Christian, but for mainly an atheist audience, is that character portrayed as like a hero or someone striving to, like, are they the underdog? How are they portrayed, written from a Mormon author's point of view with that religion? You know, are they putting God as the good guy in the story? And what did you say her name was? Yaztak. Or, you know, is she the bad guy in the story, so to speak? You know, how is she portrayed?
She's definitely viewed as a bad influence by the Vorin church leadership. As far as the characters within the story, she's not viewed as a bad guy, but not a good guy either. She's viewed as a scholar, someone who's important to the community for her scholarly work. And I think Sanderson does a really good job of exploring the other side of the question, which for me was very impressive, knowing his religious faith. I thought he did a really good job of representing the atheistic viewpoint in this character. Just the way that she communicated.
She didn't eat any babies or anything then, no.
No, nothing like that. And it was just really interesting to see how the Yazda character was written. And I thought he did a really great job portraying the atheistic viewpoint in there in a way that he really appeared to be coming across as very much open to the other side of the equation and understanding the atheist perspective. Which in contrast to writers like Orson Scott Card, who his books are very much, if you're not religious, you're absolutely evil and terrible. Because there's one series by Orson Scott Card that's called Elven Maker series, which is basically a alternative history magical retelling of Joseph Smith. To me, I found it boring. and not that entertaining. I mean, I wouldn't say at the time I read it, I didn't think it was boring, but I think if I reread it now that I'm a ex-Mormon, knowing what the book is based on, I probably would give it very bad reviews, and I'm not going to torture myself by doing that. Yeah. But, you know, he really built up his main character, Elven, who was basically the Joseph Smith character in this book, as being this almost godlike entity with all these magical powers, because he was the seventh son of a seventh son, and that imbues him with mystical magical powers.
I watched a movie about that once.
Yeah, and I just, looking back on that, I'm like, dude, I know you're just retelling Joe Smith's story, and I know you're really pumping him up to be more than he really was. And I think for Card's audience that isn't Mormon, that doesn't understand Mormonism and has no experience with it, they would never see that in this book series. They wouldn't understand it.
Now that you have left religion, have you noticed when you're reading specifically fiction? I mean, every author is a person, so we all have our beliefs or non-beliefs, and a lot of the times it's hard for authors to separate those beliefs when they're writing their books. Have you noticed that a little bit more, and how do you feel about it when you're reading a book of fiction and you can kind of feel an author who is a theist, specifically a Christian, kind of add a little bit of their rhetoric to the story in a way that, is not obvious, but I mean, that they're pushing towards, hey, Christians are great and whatever they may believe. Have you noticed that more bit since you've become, since you've left religion, and how do you feel about that?
Oh, 100%. I noticed it. I know Terry Goodkind, who recently passed, one of my favorite authors. He definitely put his own personal beliefs into his writing and made it very clear. I don't know if he was part of a particular church, but definitely his writing really speaks loudly to that right-wing Christian type ideology. And while his books themselves don't specifically say, rah, rah, God is good, you can definitely see the influence of that right-wing Christian ideology within his writing. And we see that reflected in the world that he's built, the characters, and they're clearly black and white, right versus wrong type mentality and ideology. And I don't think Goodkind necessarily did an absolutely terrible job, but I think you could definitely tell it leans more towards that. People like Orson Scott Card, he's really in your face about it. No bones about it. He's putting out his message loud and clear for everybody to hear. He even wrote a fantasy book series that's basically a retelling of the Book of Mormon. It's the Earthbound series or something like that. Again, something I would never reread now because, it would just be torture at this point for me now that my view has changed. I used to love his writing, and now recognizing the Mormon influence in his writing, I can't stand Card in a lot of his books anymore. But then going on the other way around, I mean, you look at Chronicles of Narnia, definitely that C.S. Lewis is a Christian writer.
As a child reading that, didn't see that direct correlation, but once someone said it to me a few years later, you grew up and they're like, oh, did you not know? And it's like, oh, fuck, yes, that is. But at the time, at a very young age, reading it, I didn't know it.
Well, I was actually just about to bring that up. I mean, I was raised in the Catholic Church, but I never believed. It was just what was forced on me. And it wasn't until, I don't know, less than 10 years ago that I've really gotten and read more and done more research into the secular community, not to mention my son, who when he was about 11 or 12 decided for himself he didn't believe. So I think I became more aware of those things in literature. So I would look back in literature, in any kind of media, so I would look back at books that I'd read when I was younger, and it would be obvious to me that this person is pushing, their beliefs into their writing, but I didn't see it then. I'm much more aware of it now because I'm just more aware of the skeptical. Like when I was in college, when I was getting my undergraduate, somebody suggested one of the Left Behind series for me, and if you know Left Behind, it's all about the days and whatnot. But the thing is, I went into that book. I got the book because this person didn't say to me, "Oh, it's all obviously it's about Christianity." But I got the book thinking it was fiction. It was just a story. I didn't realize that they were trying to push their agenda. But then I opened it up and I tried to read it as fiction. I don't know. It's just you notice so much more, kind of bleeding through. People attempting, and I don't know if obviously with something like Left Behind, they're doing it on purpose, but a lot of times authors don't realize that they're portraying, skeptical people or atheists as the evil ones in the story, because that's just how they see the world because of how, their religion. So is it just, have there been any books that since you've stepped away from religion, or any series at all, that you looked back on and said, oh wow, that was it was really obvious to me, but because I was a Christian back then because I was a Mormon back then, I didn't really notice what was happening and what I was being fed.
Definitely the two I've mentioned by card, the Elven Maker and the Earthbound series definitely fit that category. There is one book series though that I started reading as a Mormon that I didn't even get a quarter of way through the first book. It's the only book series I could remember, or book that I could honestly remember, that I did not finish or DNF'd. It was called The Work and the Glory. One of the worst, most boring, drab books series I ever tried to read in my life. The Work and the Glory, the only reason it was published, as far as I'm concerned, is because it was written by a Mormon, for Mormons in Utah, and presented to a Mormon publishing company, Deseret Books. It's a historical fiction of early Mormonism, and it was insanely boring. You could tell it was really written for a Mormon audience, and I just cannot believe that any other publisher would even give it a second look. It was just...
You found it boring even when you were a Mormon? Because you said
even when I was a Mormon, I just couldn't get into it. And you know, the characters like Joseph Smith was in there and a few other people, and it was cheesy, it was corny. You know, it's like the author was trying to, you know, make it all emotional, but it just came across as excessively corny and cheesy. You know, it's like a show on Disney Channel where everyone, it's like, or anime where everyone overreacts about everything.
Yeah.
Make it sound
Some
like
people
anime is a
love
bad
anime.
thing.
All right, go
you
for
make it
it.
sound
But...
like anime is a bad thing. Don't do that. No, don't do that.
All right, anime's not a bad thing. Let me just put that out there.
Yeah,
But
no, I know what he meant. The overreact, the
yeah.
emotion of anime.
Well, that's one of the reasons why, you know, just the way they do that is to get the reaction, is to deliberately to be overreact.
Well, then it works, because I'm watching anime with my daughter because, you know, I kind of promised to watch a little bit with her every week. She's nuts about anime. I'm not nuts about anime, but that's a whole nother discussion. but yeah, I mean, there's definitely a good way to approach it and a bad way to approach the whole concepts of literature. I mean, I think Robin Jordan did a really good job with his Wheel of Time as well. And I don't know if Robert Jordan was Christian. I don't know if he even had a religion. But he took these ideas of religion with the religious concepts of there being a savior, very much the Monomyth, the hero's arc. That, again, I recommend The Hero of a Thousand Faces, phenomenal book exploring these concepts.
If you can remember, man, I'll add, if you send me a list of all the books we've discussed tonight, I'll add the list in the description.
I don't know if I remember all of them, but
I know I won't. That's why I'm shifting the blame publicly to you. So if they're not there, it's Drew's fault.
All right, I'll accept the blame. But like the whole story arc of Rand being the savior. Sorry, go ahead.
I said I thought we were blaming Cadence for everything.
Well, we'll blame Cadence as well. So Cadence can keep track of the book titles and send them. How about that?
Considering how many books you have, Drew, considering how often and how much that you do read, have you ever considered writing anything yourself? Have you ever sat down and dabbled a wee idea or come up with anything?
I have actually. I've thought it would be really awesome to write a book one day. I find between balancing, you know, family, work, and, well, all the books I want to read, it's just, it can be hard to find the time and energy to really put into that. But I've got some ideas bouncing around my head that I think would make for some fantastic type magic systems, if you will. One of the ideas that I had was, you know, I'll put this out there. Maybe somebody will steal it and beat me to it. I don't care. I'm not looking for royalties on it.
Hey, you shout it out. You make it. Some people will do you some art. There's a lot of people in the community like to draw and help out and stuff. You may end up with a graphic novel. You never know.
Yeah, you never know. Yeah. You know, I've always thought, as I read more about quantum physics and Brian Greene and this concept of dark matter and dark energy, I thought, wouldn't it be cool to have a book series in a world where the magic system is based off of the balance between dark energy and the energy that we can see? We know there's about 10 times as much dark energy in the universe as there is the light energy. So the idea, like a single dark magic or dark energy user would be roughly 10% of the strength of a light energy user, so that everything's balanced out properly. but there's so many more dark magic users that a group of them could overpower single light users kind of idea. And their magic source is tapping into the energies of the universe, the dark energy and the energy we could see, the visual energy. I just thought that'd be a really cool basis for a magic system. I don't know if I will get around to writing a book based on that, but I thought it'd be a really cool basis. I haven't seen that done with anybody else. So it might be an interesting take on world building in that sense.
That's another thing I found with books as well, is you can have books of the same genre, you can have books of even the same sort of, classification, whatever, but they're all very different. And I find now that visually, because the way, again, with this is the technology we use to make this thing happen, and we did a study group and people like this thing, so this thing is now in all the shows that we use. It's in all the movies that we use, the same effect. And look at how Neo from The Matrix, whenever he did that first slow motion thing, it ends up everywhere. And the same sort of idea and thing gets propagated and pushed forward. But I find with a book, as I say, even though they're in the same genre and the same classification, two books can be completely different. It's the idea of The Simpsons did it. It's all, everything you see in TV's been a repeat. You don't find that as much with books, like.
Not at all. And there's just so many different ways of telling stories, especially fantasy. I mean, we think of fantasy where you got all these massive magical systems in this mystical world. But I mean, look at A Song of Fire and Ice, or Game of Thrones, as the show's known as. Look at that world. We know magic's part of the world, but the only real magic user we really come across are maybe the wargs and Melisandre. Beyond that, we don't really see a huge influence of magic in this world. So the magic system is really played down a lot and doesn't really play a pivotal role in the characters and their lives within Game of Thrones. Whereas we look at other books like the Stormlight Archive, which is by far my favorite book series so far in the modern fantasy at this point, which, by the way, I pre-ordered the 4th book in May. It doesn't come out till next month, and I am insanely pumped about it.
I did that with Scott Marini's new book there that came out last year. I had it pre-ordered like 6 months in advance. You need to find out what's happening next in the next story. Like.
Oh, you have no idea. This is a 10-book series, and this is only the 4th one. These are 1,200-page books. They are not small.
We're still waiting for the next, George R. R. Martin one. But...
you've got the Mandalorian next week. You'll be all right.
And Stormlight Archive is better than both of them. I'm just putting that out there. And I would love to see an adaptation, but I think they would need to make like a 31-hour episode just for their series, just for the first book alone.
Yeah, that is the problem, as you made a reference point to earlier. Like, anyone who's reading a book, a decent-sized book that has some sort of a story that you can get involved with, is going to be a couple of 100 pages long. It's not going to be a short story. And for you to sit down and read that, depending on your reading speed, it's going to take at least a couple of days. You're going to have that time and effort. And that's you just purely sitting watching that. You watch a movie, it's 2.5 hours. And as much as I do enjoy movies, and I will rewatch movies, and I can get involved in them, that you really do feel a lot more closer, and a lot more involved in it. And at the minute, I've said this, and what said for me, Pat, Michael Crichton, yes, am I saying it right? Yes. Crichton, there we are. I've said it right now. Michael Crichton, Prey. I'm reading that to the daughter at the minute, and the connection that it's building with us.
Awesome, love it.
The connection that it's building with us. And we rang her mother before we put her to bed there last week, and she was like, have to go reading Daddy's book Prey, and she knows the name, she knows what it is, and she looks forward into reading it, and it is building a connection with us that I wouldn't get reading a fucking Peppa Pig book. You know what I mean?
Oh, totally. I absolutely do know what you mean. And I've always hoped that my regular reading habits will inspire my kids to read. So far, 1 out of 3, I'm being successful.
Yes, I think there was an actual study done with that, because kids obviously repeat what their parents are doing, and there was people reading books on an iPad and people reading books from an actual book, and the book itself did encourage the child, because it's physically seen as a different thing rather than your phone, your watch, your camera. It's everything, it's a constant thing. The book is that other physical copy, that other thing that you've lifted, like.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Like, I'll spend up towards of 3 hours a day reading. And I've kind of got my routine down pat. Is I'll get up in the morning at about 6 a.m. While I'm having my coffee and kind of waking up, I'll watch a watch booktubers or whoever I follow for about an hour. And then from about 7 to 9, I spend this is my reading time. This is my reading zone. And I do this in the morning because it's the only time I got where everyone else is in bed. It's quiet. And I could just focus on what I'm reading and really get into the world and the characters and what's going on with that. And then on my days off, what I'll usually do is I'll turn on an audiobook in the afternoon and just kind of listen. Now with the audiobooks, I'm listening to books I've already read, because when I'm physically reading, I need kids go away. I need my reading zone. There's this invisible wall here. I'm not here. I'm in Roshar, or I'm in, Middle Earth, or whatever I'm reading. and that is my time. So if I'm not working, I'll usually keep reading until the kids come down. So they'll come down in the morning and, they'll say, "All right, Dad, we're up. It's time to stop reading now." I was like, "Oh man."
I'm a night reader. Like I like it after having that end of the day when you have it to look forward to. Like I have this and this and this to do, and I work from home, so that's part of it. Like if I finish everything that I need to do, then I can have this time just to myself after my son goes to bed to pick up my book and read at the end of the day. So
I just found I can't do that. I'm too tired at night.
Oh, okay.
Like my mind just doesn't focus. But I've gotten into such a routine and habit that if I miss a day of morning reading, I find that I'm just grumpy and irritable all day.
Yeah, it's your coffee. You haven't had your coffee in the morning.
Even with my coffee, if I don't get my reading done, I'm grumpy and irritable all day.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I'm just mad because I didn't get a chance to find out what Rand, when the Wheel of Time is up to. I'm reading that right now.
I find that like with driving to work, I really need my music in the morning. If I don't have my music in the morning and that chance to listen to that to sort of wake me up, and I can feel myself physically waking up, and feeling that bit better. But everybody in their routines,
Oh yeah, it's all. There's been days I've come running up to my room here where I got my workstation set up, and it's like just a few minutes before I started. My wife looks at me. It's like, "Have you had breakfast already?" I'm like, "Nope." She's like, "You got too caught up in your book, didn't you?" I'm like, "Yes." I gotta log in.
I got in trouble in work the first time I read Stone Junction. I got in trouble at work, taking my lunch break, and I'm out the back, and it's like 20 minutes after on the floor, and it's like, there's fucking 15 pages left. It's like, fuck off. I'm fucking, you get really involved.
That's why I can't read at work.
Yeah.
My breaks will be too long. But yeah, it's definitely a lot of fun. And, one of the great things I love about reading is, in addition to the exploration of these religious themes, which I feel like I'm a lot more attuned to after my religious experience. And coming out of that, I seem to be a lot more aware of how these things relate. Is one thing I absolutely love about it is books and stories. They are a fantastic platform for really exploring all these kind of ideas, and cultural ideas, political ideas, social conventions and ideas, and the way that we use it. There's so much I've learned from reading. I've been reading a book. I've come across a word I've never in my life heard of. So I put the book down, I Google the word, and it just leads me down this rabbit hole. And suddenly I'm learning all this really cool stuff because of one word I happened to come across in one book. And that's just a really cool thing about it. I've had a lot of really good conversations with some friends of mine about these ideas. One friend of mine, he's really big on the meaning behind words and languages, and what we really mean when we say things in a certain way, and these types of occult ideas and meaning behind the meaning kind of thing. And there's this one book series by Peter V. Brett, which I absolutely love, called The Demon Cycle, which definitely has its religious ideology influence in it as well. And as of my favorite authors are the ones that don't clearly take a side.
Yeah. Well,
but rather have that balance to explore it.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a way of writing where the story is clearly on one side, but the author clearly doesn't come across as being on that side. but rather just taking that idea and creating a story out of it.
Yeah, portraying the story
versus the author that's very much in your face. Like, I did read one book that was clearly from the atheist perspective, and it was terrible because the entire book read like an angry atheist mantra against religion. And, you know, it was thought, hey, you'll like this because, you know, you left religion. And no, that doesn't guarantee I'll like it. I thought it was an absolutely horrible book. Right?
Well, speaking of which,
can't stand them.
We have had a few questions in the chat. One of them does aim us down that route, so I'll start. If anyone I want to shout out has questions for Drew, do tag me. I have been collecting them and building them up here in the side chat for Drew. So if you do have any questions, let me know. And we'll skip one or two to make a reference to that. Spooky Bedhair asks, what is the worst book you've ever read? And he does ask, is there a book you couldn't finish? You did mention that earlier, where there was the Mormon one, wasn't there?
Yeah, The Work and the Glory is one I just did not finish. I had the whole series. I got probably not even a quarter way through the first one. I thought, this is terrible, I can't do this, and I got rid of the whole series. It's probably the only book I could think of that I've actually had to throw out because I hated it so much.
So hated it, didn't finish it. Yeah, don't buy it.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, there's been a few that I really haven't liked. One that comes to mind is Terry Goodkind's The Girl in the Moon, which Goodkind's a best-selling author. Like, he wrote the Sword of Truth series, which is actually named two of my daughters after characters from the Sword of Truth. It tells you how much I love that series that I would name my kids after the characters. But there's one book, well, kind of a book series. That Nest was the first one, The Girl in the Moon, the second one, which I really didn't like because it was very much written as a political essay on gun control. And it was very obvious Goodkind was in favor of less gun control. And I want to be clear, I didn't dislike it because of my opinion on gun control. That was really a moot point, regardless of what side of that issue. I don't want to get into political discussion, but it's not my opinion on gun control that was the issue. It was the fact that he wrote the book, read like an essay on gun control, and then his characters made decisions that were completely against the very way in which he wrote the character. So he wrote the character as this one way, and then they'd make decisions, and like, why would the character even care about that? It makes no sense. In one moment, they're carrying a gun, and in the next chapter, they're leaving their gun at home because it's not legal to carry their gun. It's like, why would they even care?
Yeah.
If they were carrying it over here, like, there was a huge lack of consistency, and it was almost as if he was using those times where it contradicted itself to drive his point home that gun control was bad. Why? Because the bad things happened when the character didn't have their gun. And it's like, this is just terrible. Like, come on, Terry, you're better than this.
It's really. Oh, I didn't have it, so just having it. Another question from
really fucked up version of Chekhov's gun, I guess.
We have a question from Critical Cripple. Have you ever read the Hyperion series?
Oh, yes, I did. It wasn't too long ago that I actually finished that. I've got a whole series of book reviews on the Hyperion Cantos. That one, I really liked the how it approaches, particularly religion, within that series. It was really this. It used the Catholic Church as the boogeyman essentially in this series. I don't know if that was just because they were an easy target or because Dan Simmons has a history with the Catholic Church. I just don't know. But they are basically the biggest Christian denomination on earth. And
you ask.
It was a really dark, twisted presentation of religious theology, like really dark and occult. And I love that they have this cruciform parasite, which basically takes control of your body and consistently resurrects you, but you have to join the church to have this really bastardized version of everlasting life. Like, if you don't join the church, you can't be resurrected, and you have to have this cruciform, which will take over your body. And it's a parasitic creature in the shape of a cross that's biologically engineered to constantly resurrect you when you die. And you don't join, you don't get everlasting life. So it was a very, very literal interpretation of that, and in a very occult, dark, disturbing twisted viewpoint, which I loved, by the way. I loved how that worked out. I'm a sucker for the dark occult themes in books. I love books that really get into the darker side of the psyche, so to speak, that really get in there and just go, yeah, this is like the really darkest part of us, and this is how I can tell a story on that. Is just really awesome.
Ox was wondering if you've ever read The Art of War and if you liked it or not.
I know of it. I've never read it, so I can't tell you if I liked it. But it's one that's I've definitely thought about reading at some point. But of course, I got like a million books on my wish I had list and about 100 on my TBR pile right now. So,
have you ever read Machiavelli's The Prince?
No.
Okay.
I think there's one or two of his books I think I had an interest in reading, but I haven't got to that one.
There's the question because people tend to, reference Machiavelli a lot, specifically that book, which he wrote based around Cesare Borgia, who was Pope Alexander X or something's son, who led his army and everything like that. Long story, but anyway, a lot of people reference it to say, oh, because it's very Machiavellian and because of the way he acted and because it's evil and stuff like that. But there is some people theorize that he wasn't building up Cesare or the fictional prince in the book. He wasn't saying this is a good thing, this is the way that you're supposed to act in order to win wars and stuff like that. He was pointing out how evil can creep into families and society and how people can become a certain way in order to gain power. I was just wondering if you had ever read it, but never mind.
That sounds like a book I would probably enjoy, though.
Yeah.
So I will definitely have to try to keep that in mind and remember that one, because that definitely sounds interesting.
Yeah,
for sure.
And with same idea with Margaret Mitchell's Gone with the Wind too, because a lot of people see it as her not only standing behind the Confederacy, but building up the South and the fight that they had. But most people that have read the book see it as the opposite, that she's pointing out the faults in what happens. And I don't know, I think it's kind of a parallel to what Machiavelli did with the Prince, because I've read it, and from what I know about the Borgias and that time period, as well as having read the book, I can completely see why people believe that, he's building them up, but it's a little bit more obvious that he's really pointing out, no, this is fucked. So
right. Yeah. I always try to be careful to assume that the viewpoint from which the author is writing is by default their actual belief. Because I mean, there are books where it is blatantly obvious the message they're trying to send.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if I don't know, I don't want to assume that is their inherent belief. I mean, for me, that'd be like assuming Brandon Sanderson is secretly an atheist because he has an atheist character in his book and does such a good job representing that side. I don't want to assume that, right? Which I have to admit, I find it interesting and kind of funny that Mormons seem to produce some of the best fantasy writers out there. Brian McClellan's another one that actually studied under Brandon Sanderson at BYU. He's got a really good Powder Mage series. But yeah, I mean, some authors are blatantly obvious. And the reason I could, since I learned about going back to where Scott Clark's, that's one I'm most familiar with in terms of the Mormon religion coming into the books. The more I learned about him, the more I started to recognize that in his writing, because he's been a very much outspoken, religious apologist, very much outspoken against the gay community. And like his political and religious opinions, he's come under a lot of fire and controversy and for his opinions on these things. And so knowing and seeing that, and then connecting that with his books, I don't need to say, well, I assume he's writing from his perspective. I know he's writing from his belief, because it's blatantly obvious when he's so public about his belief, and you see that written within the books. But for other writers, like with the Hyperion Cantos with Dan Simmons, I don't know why he wrote the Catholic Church as the boogeyman, Is it because he's an outsider and he sees them as bad? Is he an insider and sees them as bad? Or is he just neutral and he knows that people see him as bad, so he capitalized on that in his story? I don't know. And I don't want to assume that he has this hate on for the Catholic Church, because I just don't know. But it might just be he happened to pick Catholicism. Could have easily have picked Judaism or Islam.
Yeah.
To tell the same story, right?
Yeah.
So it definitely never assume that an author is writing from their perspective unless you really know from the things you've seen outside of their works, is the way that I would approach that.
Do you have top 3 books that you could recommend to people, considering our audience would be slightly atheistic, other than anything that we've mentioned tonight, like Hyperion and the one that you mentioned earlier? Would you have possibly a non-fiction book you could recommend that we would read, and 2 fiction books possibly?
I did, as far as non-fiction, feel for atheist audience, the God Delusion I enjoyed by Richard Dawkins. That one, I wouldn't say it's perfectly balanced, but it's certainly a lot more balanced than, say, The End of Faith. So for a fiction side of things, definitely I would recommend that one. In terms of nonfiction, specifically books that deal with a kind of religious, or have that religious ideology built in. If you're looking for a religious book, I have to go back to the Stormlight. I know you want one we haven't mentioned, but it's just so well written, especially if you go into it looking for that contrast between the atheist viewpoint and the religious viewpoint, because it's not just the one character. Eventually we have another character who becomes an apostate and is basically excommunicated from the Voron church for declaring God is dead. So and the balance there is just really well done. And I would love to say another one that maybe we haven't mentioned, but that really is probably the first one that comes to mind when looking at a good balance between the two, where it's not preaching to you, but exploring the issue from both sides.
Amanda, have you any questions?
No.
I have another one making a reference, because we were talking about Star Trek. I was going to. Spooky wants to know about your thoughts on Janeway murdering Tuvix.
Nope, nobody cares, Spooky.
Tuvok?
No, Tuvix. Tuvix.
Oh, Tuvix.
You remember the
Tuvix.
episode with the combination of the two between Neelix and Tuvok?
Vaguely, it's been a long time since I've watched Voyager. I'm going to have to go with neutral on that, because it's been a long time since I've seen the episode.
It's quite funny.
I'm rewatching Next Gen right now.
Manda was texting John, or Dark Matter, the other day, and he told a story, or made a reference point of a story, and he mentioned Talax in the story 3 times, which is a clear reference point to Voyager, because there's a main character from a planet called Talax, which is why we were talking about it. And then it was just funny that Spooky happened to mention it as well, because it was literally yesterday we were talking about this. It's sort of a philosophical question, do people were combined together, and do you force them to say? No choice in the combination in the first place. Are you murdering one to let the other 2 live?
It's a good philosophical debate, that's for sure.
Totally off topic.
I love philosophy in my books. I really do. I love philosophy in my book, but philosophy presented well. Yes. Philosophy that explores the issue, not that is blatantly taking one side over the other. Even if it's a side I agree on that the book's taken, it will drive me up the wall if it's like, oh, rah, that, hate this.
Spooky may be able to help out here, because he's very good with the names and stuff, but there is a fella in the community that uses science fiction to discuss philosophy. He uses sci-fi. He's a huge Star Trek fan, and he uses Star Trek and sci-fi to discuss philosophical things. So,
well, Trek is inherently a philosophical show. Which I mean, even the Q in Trek could be considered essentially the God persona.
And
right?
is now completely 100% officially bored. I hate fucking Star Trek.
Well, no, I'm not a Star Trek fan. Star Wars girl. But I think we should end with our story about how we all became friends now.
I'm going to just
Okay, that's fine. No,
go on, Manda. I will let Manda tell the story because she has yeah, go on, Manda. Let everybody know our little inside joke and why Drew is wearing a ball gag in the thumbnail.
Okay, so we were watching GEs the other night, and joking around between me and Robbie and Cadence and Dave, the normal jokes that we have. Then and the ball gag came up, and as most of you that are watching know, it was part of what I got my wish list that you guys put together when I was sick, and so I was just joking about putting the ball gag on Cadence in the chat, and Robbie was texting me, but also texting Drew at the same time because Drew was watching the show, and G had brought up, the fact that he's coming on this show tonight. So anyway, Robbie types to me, I'm just picturing you all I can picture is you in the ball gag now, except he had the wrong.
Yeah, I hit send and then looked up and it was fucking sent to Drew, and it was just, oh goodness, I've had 2 conversations with this man and I just told him I can't wait to see him in a ball gag. This is great. This is just great.
It was quite flattering. I mean, whatever you like, man. You do you.
Yeah.
No judgment here.
Oh, I had Manda on the phone and I had Drew on the computer, and I sent Manda a message and her name popped to the top of the list, and I typed the message about the ball gag, hit enter, and then Drew went to the top of the list and I just went, oh fuck.
But luckily, Drew is a good sport and we all had a laugh, and now.
Yes.
So,
yes.
There you go.
There you go.
We will lean over towards Manda on the topic of book reviews, because Manda, you have something happening
Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern is me and Aaron Lewis. We're doing our first book club stream, and we're doing it on Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Who will be there? Neil, the 604 Atheist, Junkshop, Julie, Robbie, me, and Aaron. And anybody who wants to read and join along in the comments, you're more than welcome. It's not a long book where you could just read or watch the movie if you want. Doesn't matter, but come join the conversation. And so instead of living critically this weekend, we'll be doing that.
The book's probably better anyway, so.
Yeah. The book
only, 200 pages? I have to read it yet. I'm in this book review. I haven't fucking read the book yet. Drew, have you anything coming up?
Wait. Just so you know, we're not copying you or anything. This was, something that Aaron and I have been thinking of for a while. So it wasn't like, oh, Robbie's having Drew on, let's do a book.
No, it was actually, and Drew knows this, it's the other way about, because I was mentioning to him that it went down a wee rabbit hole. As some people know, at the end of the night before I go to bed, I follow a few wee rabbit holes and see if I can find new people to bring on and new guests and things like that. And I seen Drew was mentioned by, I think, GE. I can't remember, but we're going to go with GE. And then I followed it down and seen book review as a channel. So I was like, oh, we'll reach out to Drew because Manda has this coming up. It would be good to have an expert in the community, So you're now our book expert.
Well, I don't know if I'm an expert,
no,
but
you're now our book expert. That's it. We're giving you the mantle. We'll get you a wee badge, maybe a wee medal. We'll send it out to you. Maybe a ball gag.
All right. All right. Well, I just need my eyes to read. You could gag me. It's cool. I don't need to speak.
Have you any? What's your next book review coming up, Drew?
Right now, I'm working on the second. I just started the second book of Larry Niven's Ringworld series, Ringworld Engineers. The first book was mediocre and okay. I was nice and gave it 3 stars rather than 2.5 because Goodreads can't do a half star. But I figured, this is supposed to be a classic series, so, I'm not going to put it down. I'm going to keep reading through the series and hopefully it gets better. And I'm currently working on Lord of Chaos as well, book 6 in the Wheel of Time. This is my 3rd time through Wheel of Time. Not that I'm a fan of the series or anything. I'm just reading it for the 3rd time.
Yeah.
Great series.
Yeah.
So, I'll be getting that one up once I'm done that one. And of course, as always, at the end of every month, I do a reading recap for the month, my Goodreads challenge update, and the books I expect to get to in the following months. So definitely subscribe, like, hit the bell button, find out what I'm reading, and see what's coming up at the end of every month, and just keep on reading.
And one thing I can say, I haven't watched, I've watched a couple of reviews and stuff, man, and watching your one that you released yesterday or the other day, there's character there. I can definitely say that the reviews are funny. You're trying to say this word, you have it on the back. It's good content and it's funny. So you're seeing Drew's personality, his lovable, laughable nature. It definitely comes through. It's not a drone. I read this book, it was shit, don't read chapter 4. There's fun and there's excitement, and there's a bit of interaction with it. So definitely, if the link's not in the description, if the link's not in the live chat, it's definitely in the description, so hit that button. Tomorrow we will be having the open mic night, and as everybody knows, coming up this Tuesday we will be live streaming the debate, or live streaming the results up until the wee hours of the morning till I pass out, because I do have fucking work the next day. But we will go as long as we can. So tomorrow we're having a political build up. I think I'm going to just get kicked and left in the corner and man for like 2 hours. So definitely call around for that tomorrow. That'll be at 10:30 UK, 5 Easterners at half. Got your time change yet? The clocks go back yet in America? No, right. So it's 4:30 in America then.
I don't know.
It's 4:14 here on the Pacific coast of Canada, so
yeah, it should be 6:30 tomorrow instead of 5:30 as it usually is. There's one more thing that I want to mention is I'm working on a video that should be out in the next couple of days, and it's actually important. So about climate science and the election and why it's important to vote and stuff. So if you guys get a chance to check it out, I don't normally push my videos, but this is important and I spent a long time on it. So if I can actually get it done, go check it out.
Hopefully have it out by Friday. I received it today. We're going to have a look.
I will say kudos to you guys who put out videos on controversial issues and subject matter. I couldn't do that. I thought about it and starting another channel with my experience in Mormonism and coming out of that, but I thought, no, I can't put up with the social media trash fire that comes with that. So I'm just sticking to books.
Feel free to come over and use the MathPig channel. That's what Manda does. She produces wonderful content, then comes in my channel and tells people to fuck off and just lets it out, So come over, man. That's what the Thursday night open mic nights are for. Everybody's welcome, and definitely your personality, your humor, your expertise in books, more than welcome here. It's been a great night. Thoroughly enjoyed this. Definitely thoroughly enjoyed this. And as I say, with the incident that happened, your reaction was instantly. I liked you instantly. So hopefully we'll see everybody back tomorrow. Drew, thank you very, very much. Have you anything you'd like to say, Drew, just before we finish?
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me on your channel. I've really enjoyed the conversation. It's always fun. Having this BookTube channel has been amazing, with even the smallest things that have happened. Being invited on your channel, as an example, I've had people offer to send me books and gifts, and it's just such a small platform where it's sitting right now, and I've had so much fun with it, and it feels really good as a small booktuber to be recognized for the effort I put into the videos and being invited on other channels such as yours to have that discussion. And I just want you to know, man, I really appreciate it. And it makes it all worthwhile, because it's a fun hobby. I love sharing it, and it's really great to see that people are interested in what I have to say and are enjoying seeing what I'm sharing, and that's just really great. It's good to know, and it makes me feel really good. So thank you.
No, you're definitely welcome, man. As a community, if one of us grows, we all grow together. We can all help each other out. We can all get to know, and as wide as the world is, having the internet gives us this ability to connect to people that we can have these conversations with and connect on a more intellectual level. How's the weather? It's fucking raining. I'm in Ireland.
Yeah, no kidding.
So again, everybody that has came tonight and watched, thank you very much. Drew, thank you very much for coming. We will see you all tomorrow. And on that, yes, Patreons, I'm shit at this. Thank you very much. I've recently got a few Patreons as well, and I'm working on the new video for the ending. Ox and Junkshop, and fucking even my mother's even giving me money now. Yeah. So everybody, thank you very much. The contribution that you do help, it really does help. As you have seen, I've recently got the new setup and stuff set, and so anything you can do, it really does help. And as Drew says, all of the love that we get from the people, it really does make this worthwhile. So thank you all for coming, and we'll see you back tomorrow. Bye bye.
Bye.